How would you like to buy this AK-47? Sell it to you for a sweet deal, sucker. Let's take a look at some of the things that can go wrong with an AK-47. Now, I am a fan of the AK, so this isn't going to be a hater video, but there are some weaknesses and problems with rifles here, so let's take a look at some of those. To begin with, it's in good shape because the bayonet fits on, but there are some problems with it. So first, let's show clear. Now, this particular rifle is a Romanian parts kit, or was a Romanian parts kit, and I put this one together. This was in fact one of my first builds, and like so many of my first builds, they were not particularly well done, and they haven't held up to the test of time. So when we look at this one, it's a US receiver that was a flat. So it started out looking something like this. Flat piece of metal, all stamped out, and you can see on this side where the dimple is and where the selector notch is, where the holes are for the trunnions. We can see the dimples, the marks for the trigger and hammer pin, and this one's got this is a different type, so it doesn't have the hole for the folder stock, but you can see the trunnion holes up front that are similar. Underneath, you can see the hole for the magazine, the trigger, the pistol grip, and the holes for the rivets for the pistol or the trigger guard and the mag catch. So this is a flat. This would then be folded into a C shape, and if you look at the back of an AK, you can see that C shape, or you can see where that flat receiver was folded around. Taking a look inside here further, you can see how it folds up and it becomes the rail for the bolt carrier, which slides on these two rails. Now if we look inside, there's this, which is the inside rail, which the bolt carrier also depends on, and that is spot welded, and you can see the spot welding where those are installed. The reason I explain all this is this needed to be bent, but then it needed to be heat treated. In other words, this is soft metal right now before it's worked. Once it's folded and pushed into shape, then it needs to be heat treated. Well, why do you need to heat treat? Let's take a look at some of the reasons why. So we've just kind of taken the AK apart here, and first let's take a look at those rails. Not exactly straight anymore. Now, AK rails don't need to be perfectly straight, but you can see how these have kind of warped, and that's because they don't have the rigidity that a fully heat-treated receiver would have. Another way to see that it's not heat-treated well, you can see how it rises here and has a depression here. We should be able to see from this side too some problems with again, the shape. It should be a nice flat shape, and it's all warped and kind of twisted here. So the reason again is because it's not heat treated, it's not rigid, and it's not holding its shape. Let's take a look at the biggest problem, and that would be, well, first, because of this problem here, as soon as there's recoil of the firearm, the safety just falls out. So the gun doesn't really shoot well with the safety, because the receiver has bowed enough here to not let the safety go all the way across and fit like it's supposed to. And again, that's a result of the heat treating. But the worst problem is here in the hammer spring and in the trigger spring. And I'll just pick that out of there. And you can see how open these holes have gotten. They've mushroomed and expanded from the constant back and forth of the hammer, and they've almost opened up to where the pin will go completely through. And obviously this isn't supposed to allow that. It's supposed to be the diameter of this. not that. So the pins have opened up here, they've opened up in the hammer, and you can see just by pulling the trigger how wobbly that pin gets. So it's not shootable. So how did it get this bad? Didn't just 2 shots and it got this bad. This is the gun I learned to bump fire on, and like a lot of people I thought that was awesome for a minute or two, especially when ammo was $89 for 1,000 rounds. But once you figure out there's really no ability to hit anything real well with it, it's just a noisemaker and it costs a lot of money. It's not as much fun anymore. And for me, once I ruined an AK, I decided it wasn't as fun as it used to be. So the constant firing, thousands and probably 3,000 rounds through this one easily, probably thousands of rounds more than that actually, opened up the holes to the point where they're no longer usable. Like I say, the trigger will drop the trigger group right out by just pulling the trigger a few times. Another problem is the rivets on an AK. And again, these are all exaggerated examples here because this one didn't get heat treated well. But if you see the part here, the front trunnion, where these 3 rivets are riveted to, that's connected directly to the barrel. Let's just say that's the barrel there. So I don't know if you can see good, but check out the gap here. This shouldn't move at all. These rivets here have become loose. I think I could probably wiggle it from the inside. The back rivets are completely loose. The front ones, I did them correctly. They're in the trunnion and then the barrel's pushed in, but again, all that constant abuse has opened up the holes, and again, the poor heat treating on the receiver has allowed it to sort of separate. So this one's not destroyed. I can still take this receiver out of here, just remove all the parts, put a new start with a new receiver and put this all back together, and it probably will eventually. But for now, I use this one as an example of what can happen when you don't properly heat treat a receiver on an AK and then use it a lot. Now, I didn't realize when I built this one that I did a poor job of heat treating it, but after a lot of abuse, I definitely saw the results. Another problem is that the folding stock gets real loose. Now that's not such a big problem because that's just going to happen over time to most stocks anyway. There's plenty of adjustment in there to go in and tighten all that stuff up and get the stock in good working order again. Now let's take a look at another physical characteristic that I screwed up when I built this one, and that's the bluing. And you might be able to see in this video, depending on how good the lighting is, but the stock is kind of a purple color where the receiver is a darker blue or black. And I was still learning how to do the bluing, so I probably left them in a different amount of time, or I didn't clean this well enough. But for whatever reason, I ended up with almost a purple stock on this one. So this is some of my construction problems. Otherwise, this it was a decent gun. It shot fine for quite a while. Like I said, we had a lot of fun with it. The underfolder is a great weight distribution, I guess, with having the lighter back end. Just was very easy to bump fire. However, I can't say that bump firing is all it's cracked up to be. Now what I usually do with this one is take that hammer back out and then run this, I think it's a Fab Defense barrel plug. Basically just a long piece of plastic that sticks out the end. But you'll see what I do with that in a second. Then I take the bolt out because I don't want this one to fire. So I remove the bolt completely. So now it has no hammer and no bolt. But I assemble it the rest of the way. And I usually leave the safety out because it's so warped and twisted that it's just going to fall out with any amount of use anyway. This one's loose here in the middle where you're not used to feeling an AK be loose. So now I'll pull back the bolt carrier and push down just on the edge of the end of the barrel there. I just push down the plastic and it crams into where the round would probably be, right up through where the bolt would be. Since there's no bolt in here, the bolt carrier just goes right up around it. I'm still able to insert a magazine. So this is a perfect training AK, in my opinion. It's got the barrel plugged. There's no possible way for it to fire. There's no hammer, there's no selector, and there's no bolt. So it's perfectly safe. Doesn't look perfectly safe, I guess, so it's definitely not a toy. It's obviously still a firearm. Even though it's destroyed, the receiver does still hold the parts together, and it does still have my serial number on it. I did build this one from a flat, so it was never built at a manufacturer, so it's not necessarily a registered firearm, but here in the US we don't have to register firearms, so although I do need to treat it as a firearm, it is still a firearm. But this is some things that can go wrong with an AK, and obviously these are exaggerated examples. You shouldn't need to worry about anything like this when you go to the store to buy an AK, but if you do see any of these symptoms on any AK you're thinking about buying, run, don't walk to the nearest exit. These are very bad signs for an AK. Well, if you thought that was interesting, let me know. I've got plenty of poor builds, and we can look at problems and mistakes for quite a long time, unfortunately. As always, thanks for watching.
The guys and gals of gunwebsites.com encourage you to take a CCW class every year, practice at least once a month, and carry every day. Thanks for watching gunwebsites.com.